Guys, welcome to a very special episode of Coliseum Forum. Welcome back. Uh, Obviously, we usually do Coliseum Forum on Thursdays. Today, I had a guest that I couldn't wait until Thursday, Mr. David Felding, also known as Zordon of Eltar. How are you doing today, sir?
I am good. I'm good. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
So we're just gonna jump right into this. You're Zordon. Like, I don't know what else to say. Like, you were literally, like, you're the Zordon. Like, you recruited the five teenagers with attitude, that Fault Reader Repulsa, and Lord Zed, and holy crap, you're Zordon.
Yeah, it's all my fault. I apologize. So yeah.
So obviously a big Power Rangers fan. I've read a lot about like the development of the show and things like that. There's some really really cool resources. They just did an episode about the toys that made us on Netflix about you guys last year. Um, I understand for you, your experience on Power Rangers was like a lot different. For us as kids in the '90s, we saw you on TV every Saturday morning, and then after it got syndicated after school every day. But for Zordon, as Zordon himself, that was just one day of work for you, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I mean the way the whole project came together, uh, they filmed all of Zordon's footage in one day for the pilot that they shot, and then they just followed suit the same way they did with the Japanese footage. They just recycled it over and over and ran that footage throughout the life of the character. So it was super convenient and cost effective for them. As an actor, it really kind of it could have been better, but it is what it is, and uh, quite pleased to be a part of this pop culture phenomenon that is Power Rangers.
Oh, I mean, I mean, it's not insubstantial. I mean, Power Rangers premiered in 1993. I was 9 years old. It actually premiered 2 days before my ninth birthday. Um, I have a 4-year-old at home who knows who you are. And we're almost 30 years later. My 4-year-old knows who Zordon is. In fact, he's probably watching the Daddy Show as we interview right now.
That kind
Uh,
of stuff still blows my mind that people all around the world know who we are, and I here I am. I'm just a guy living my life, and somebody 40 countries away knows who I am. That's so bizarre to me. But again, very humbling and very glad to be a part of it. So
so obviously you are not an incorporeal blue head in a tube. But I do have to ask, do you ever get recognized? I mean, Power Rangers is just as popular now as it was in 1993.
I get recognized when I'm at a convention. Somebody did yell my name out on the street in New York City, and I was like, "What the?" Uh, but outside of a convention, outside of anything to do with Power Rangers, I can walk about and nobody knows who I am. Uh, I leave the tube at home. I don't
Right.
carry it with me. So no, I do enjoy a great deal of anonymity, I guess. Uh, some of the other actors who are much more recognizable than they get recognized on the street, but not me. So
So now I kind of want to rewind because we got a little bit of the subject I want to talk about. I know it was one day of shooting for you, and then they just kind of recycled it the same way the Sentai footage was for the Power Rangers. Um, but what was that like for you in terms of like how did they prepare you to be Zordon? Like what was that one? What was your audition process like? And then you get there and they're like, hey, by the way, you're a giant floating head tube. Like, but we've got to do this with some like TV magic. So what was that all like?
well, my audition was quite different than anybody else that was involved with the show. All of the other actors went through a number of weeks. They went through an extended audition process. Um, they were paired up with different groups, and they had to be very physical and uh, either dance or do gymnastics or show off their martial arts skills. I was actually called. I had recently moved to Los Angeles. I hadn't been living there more than 2 months, and I had been called from a friend that I knew in college who was working at Saban at the time, and she was, I believe, like the second AD on the pilot that they were shooting, and called me up and said, we're having an audition for this character. I think you'd be really great for it. I put your name in. They would like to see you. Can you come down to the building later this afternoon on an audition? And I was like, yeah, sure, of course. That's what I'm doing here in LA. So I went down there thinking that it was going to be a cattle call, that there would be like 1,000 guys. I would get my little 2-minute time. I would read the lines, go home, and never hear anything. But when I got down there, it was just myself and another gentleman. and they described the part to us. They told us what the character was, and then we sort of separated into two different corners, and they called us in one by one, and they took him in first, and he was in there for about 20 minutes or so, and then came back out, and then they brought me in, and I met the director and the producers, and I met the original cast, and they stood me up on a table, and I used the voice that basically ended up being used on the show. And I remember Austin St. John saying, well, I think we found our Zoltar, which was the original name of the character at the time. And I went home, and a couple hours later, I got a phone call saying, congratulations, you got the part, and we're going to be filming next week. And it was a very quick turnaround process. And also my first professional job in LA. So it's pretty cool.
It's a pretty big job to start out, as the mentor and leader of the Power Rangers.
Yeah, and as far as like preparation for it, the only thing they told me was like, he's a 10,000-year-old wizard, he's trapped in a time warp. Go. So I basically had to sort of like rely on my own fairly decent comic book knowledge, my knowledge of Greek mythology, and my love of D&D and all that kind of stuff, and just sort of like push all that together and try to come up with some sort of presence. And I guess they liked what I came up with, so that's what happened.
So you're one of us. You're a nerd.
Oh yes, very much so. Yeah, I was playing D&D in '79, and I was reading comic books, and yeah, I was a huge nerd.
Well, that actually leads me into the next thing I wanted to talk about is you chose the right place to come visit. If you're not aware, you're just tuning in. David Fielding and Austin St. John, the original Red Ranger, they're actually going to be paying us a visit here in Florida, and they're starting their tour at Coliseum Comics, because why not? You guys are going to be here on Wednesday at two of our locations. You're going to be at our Millennia location. You're also going to be at our Kissimmee location, our two flagship stores. And then you have some other stops in Florida too, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, we have 7 stops, I believe. We're gonna be there for 5 days. So yeah.
Excellent. And we have all those posts up on our social media. You can check, but I can tell you for a fact they will be in Coliseum Wednesday at our Millennia location, and then our Kissimmee location. So if you don't have a lot going on Wednesday, it's New Comics Day. Power Rangers #1 just came out 2 weeks ago. Swing by. We're gonna have plenty of comics for you to get signed, and it's really an opportunity to, I mean, at least for me, it was a childhood dream to meet and talk to David Fielding. And you're also going to have Austin St. John, who obviously is Jason Scott Lee. And we're actually going to be doing a Coliseum Forum with him tomorrow. So everybody knows the things I talk about the most are the X-Men, Power Rangers, which is, I never grew past the Power Rangers. And so this is insane. I told my wife this morning, I was like, I might actually just get so excited I forget everything I was going to ask. So,
well, we can take as much time as you want. I have all my evening free, so
don't sign that. Don't write that check, because we'll be here for. I've got a lot of questions.
Okay.
So you go in, you're Zoltar, you do your audition live with the cast. What is that day of filming as Zordon like? I mean, I know they pinned your ears back and kind of darkened your eyebrows, but did you just look into a camera, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, if I remember correctly, if I have all of my, if I have the timeline correct, it was the last day of filming that they had scheduled for the pilot that they were shooting, and they had been filming for a number of weeks and a number of days, and so when I showed up at the warehouse where they were going to film the scene, I had to go in and I had to get into the makeup chair. And they had discussed with me before about if I was going to be all right if they shaved my hair off. And they shaved me bald. They glued my ears back and darkened my eyebrows, slathered me with green paint up to my neck, and then brought me out into the room where the camera setup was. And they had this big green screen, and I sat in like this. My memory is of a barber chair, but it was a big chair, and I had like a blanket across from me. So the only thing that showed up was like half my green chest and my pink head against the green screen. And I just saw a lot of bright lights in my face. And because it was the last day of filming, because they'd been working so hard, the director and a number of the crew members were sick. They had contracted some colds or whatever. So they were a good 30 yards away from me, and I was getting directions through a megaphone about what to do. And all the cast was there feeding me their lines for the scenes that we were doing, but they were just shadows to me. I couldn't see their faces and stuff. And we were there for a good 4 hours, I guess, doing the scene a number of times, and I did a number of improv things and different facial expressions. Again, not realizing at the time that they were collecting all that footage so that they could just recycle it over and over. And at the end of it, I got cleaned up, and then I went to my job, and that was the day. So yeah.
So at that point, because I know this, when you moved out to LA, this was your first big gig. What was your day job at that point?
At that time, I was working at a satellite company. I was monitoring their. I was working third shift, so I would go into this computer center, and I would make sure that the satellite feed for their satellite movies that they were showing was running correctly, and I would do backup on the tape or whatever, and I would just monitor the system for like 6 or 7 hours during the night, and then go home at like 6 o'clock in the morning or something like that. So I filmed Zordon during the day. I had like a 3-hour break, I guess, and then I went to work. So yeah.
So this is a story I've told a million times, and I never thought I'd have the opportunity to tell you. For me, the in the fall, right before you went back to school, that's when they started running promos for like the new Saturday morning cartoons what'll be out. And then, you know, you've spent the whole summer watching rerun Saturday morning cartoons, and now the new stuff is coming in. It's very exciting. So you look forward to Saturday because, again, you're going to be watching reruns, but you get all these new advertisements for all these new really cool cartoons. And at this point, there's nothing like the Power Rangers that exist. There's just nothing even in the same realm. If you're a little bit older, you had like Ultraman, or maybe you had some experience with like kaiju movies like Godzilla and things, but Power Rangers as a thing is just not, it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I mean, when they described the show, to me, I got it right away because I grew up with Ultraman. I watched Battle for the Planets, which is the Gotchaman, the U.S. Gotchaman cartoon. So I was very familiar with the sort of Sentai and anime world. I mean, I didn't watch a whole lot of it, but I was familiar with it. So it made perfect sense to me. I was like going, wow, this is really exciting. And the fact that it was, you know, giant robots and big rubber monsters, I was all about that. I loved Godzilla. I thought that was super awesome. So, and what was the thing that was most exciting for me was that Power Rangers was in an hour block with the X-Men cartoon that Saban was running at the same time.
The best Saturday mornings ever existed was because of those two things back to back.
Yeah, and so I was like, I'm the Power Rangers Professor X, and that is really freaking awesome. So
that is absolutely true.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the X-Men comics and cartoons, and I was just like, I get this. It's, you know, it's these are my people. So it was fine. So yeah.
So I'm going to tell you the story. This is how we found out about Power Rangers. They're running those ads to advertise it for the fall block for the new cartoons on Saturday morning. I had gotten up, made the mistake to go get a new bowl of cereal or go to the restroom or something like that. And I come back, and my brother, he's a year younger than me. So in this story, I'm 8, he's 7, and he is, I've never seen him freak out like this to this day. He's freaking out, and I'm like, what? And he's like, Billy, you missed it. There was this commercial for the show, and it was called like Super Soldiers or like Space Rangers, and he can't remember exactly what it's called. And I was like, well, okay, well, what is it? And he's like, they've all got these costumes, and they have like dinosaur robots, and Billy, you don't understand. It's so cool. It's the coolest thing ever. And so for the rest of the Saturday morning, I'm waiting for this ad to come on, and I'm like, it's getting to the point where I'm telling my brother Brendan, I'm like, hey man, you're making this up. Nothing that cool is on TV. There's no way this exists. And so we lived with our grandparents at the time. Saturday mornings, my grandfather was home from work. He got the TV as soon as Saturday morning cartoons ended. So I go to my grandpa and I'm like, Pop, listen, there's this ad for this show that may eventually be on TV. Can we just watch Fox a little bit longer? And for whatever reason, my grandfather was like, yeah, that's fine. We'll watch Fox a little bit longer. And the very next commercial break is the commercial for you guys. And it was over after that. For you on your end, I mean, this is just something you went in, you did your day of work, you're Zordon. When did you realize, like, oh, this is something, we've made something here?
it actually hit me how big the show was after I left. I mean, I left the show shortly after it started airing. I was very unhappy living in LA at the time. I was working two jobs, and I didn't really feel connected to the show because I would just be brought in to do voices like every 5 or 6 weeks.
Right.
Whenever because we filmed the pilot in October of 1992,
Right.
and I didn't actually go back to work for Power Rangers until like late January, maybe February of the following year.
Right.
And these guys had been going to set and doing these ridiculously long days. They did these 14, 16-hour days, 6 days a week, putting these episodes together. And I just went in and they had like 5 episodes in the can, and I just was in the booth for like, I don't know. I was booked for a 2-hour block, but I don't think we were in there the whole time. We couldn't have been in there more than a half hour. And we just knocked out the lines as quickly as possible. And they said, okay, well, we'll call you when we have a new block to come in. But that didn't happen for like another 5 or 6 weeks. So by the time the show went on the air, August 28th, 1993, I was sort of burnt out and done with LA. I felt I wasn't doing what I came out here to do. I had realized that if I wanted to pursue something like this, there might be some things about myself I might have to change, and I wasn't prepared to do that sort of thing. So I had made the decision to leave, and Tony Oliver he worked very hard to try to get me to stay. He was, if you can just stick it out another 6 months, this thing is really going to take off. And at that time, you can't really see where you are when you're down on the ground. You can't take a step back and actually see the bigger picture about everything. But when I was after I had left and was back on the East Coast, and I had heard about the live show that they did and how they backed up the LA freeway for like 8 miles, I was thinking, wow, that's some serious fandom going on there. And then come Christmas season, when I was at the mall, I happened to walk by the KB Toys, and there was like this commotion going on about people scrambling for these toys. And I'm like, what is this all about? And I kept hearing, oh, Power Rangers. And I was like, oh, they've got Power Rangers toys. That's pretty cool. And then I see the Power Dome, and there's my face, and I'm like, wow, I'm never going to see a penny of that. That's pretty awesome. So that was when I thought, okay, that's pretty big. Maybe I should have stuck it out for another 6 months. But I had made my choice, and I was very happy where I was at the time. And then after that, I just sort of like lost contact with the show. I was off doing my own thing. So, yeah.
Well, let's talk about that for a little bit. So after you leave Power Rangers, you pursued writing, right? Is that correct?
Well, yeah. I mean, I went back to Pittsburgh. I had gotten my Master of Fine Arts in Acting from the University of Pittsburgh, and I had a lot of friends back there. So that's where I moved back to. And I got into doing voices for video games. And I did voices for a number of Dungeons and Dragons games for a company called Dreamforge Entertainment, and got to know their head writer really well, and was asking a lot of questions. And he said, well, would you like to write the clue book for one of these games that we're doing? So I got my sort of like first writing job through a computer game company, and was doing voices for them. And I got to voice direct a couple of their games. I got to bring in some of my friends to do voices for these games. And then I ended up moving outside of Boston and doing voices and stuff for other video games for companies that were in the Boston area, and working for a couple of video game companies there as a designer, writer and designer. And that's how I spent my post Power Rangers years for about, over a decade, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. And so how does Zordon stay busy these days?
Zordon stays busy by writing his Lincoln Bright novels. That's what Zordon's doing right now. So
I was hoping you'd mention that. So tell us a little bit about Lincoln Bright.
Lincoln Bright is an idea that I came up with in around 2013. If you've been in and around the entertainment industry, you know that if you want to tell a story or to get anybody interested in your creative project, you really kind of have to put a spin on things. You have to uh, find a hook, as they call it, to get people interested. And I had this really interesting idea for a ghost story, and I've always been a fan of Stephen King and paranormal kind of stuff, and this idea just wouldn't go away. It kept turning around and around in my head, and I tried to put a spin on it. I tried to give it a little hook to make it different from any of these other ghost stories that you might hear about. And so that's where I came up with the idea of glims. Um, a glim is the leftover nastiness of somebody's life that just won't go away after they die. Um, and as the character Lincoln says, you may have think of them as phantoms or ghosts, but they're not. They're glims. And the difference with glims is they don't just haunt an area and create a cold spot or something like that. These things are very malicious, and they're actually working really hard to unstitch reality, to create a hole in the world so that things on the other side can come through. And those things on the other side are very ravenously hungry, and those are the things that Lincoln tries to prevent from getting into our world. So that's the Lincoln Bright world in a nutshell. So,
And how far through that series are we at this point?
book 1 came out in February. Book 2 is scheduled to come out this following February, and I'm in the middle of writing book 3 right now.
Excellent. Okay. And where can we find those on Amazon? Where?
Yeah, I just posted a link to it earlier today on my Twitter. It's at Barnes & Noble through Caffeine and Ink. That's my publisher.
Okay. Excellent. I'm definitely gonna snap up.
I'll be bringing copies of it when I go to Florida. So I'll bring to have a few copies at Coliseum. So
Never mind. I'll pick up a copy on Wednesday. So, you've moved back east. You walk past KB Toys. Rest in peace, KB Toys is my favorite toy store as a kid. And you're like, oh, that's a toy of me. At that point, I mean, had you really disengaged with it? Like you didn't watch it on TV, or had you isolated yourself from the franchise, or?
well, I wouldn't say isolated. It just wasn't in the realm of what I was doing with myself. It was just a very interesting anecdote I could tell at party. I was like, oh yeah, I was on a TV show when I was living in Hollywood, and just really sort of, and because we didn't have the internet, or well, we had the internet, I guess, but it really wasn't.
It was awful.
There was no whole social media aspect to it, and even when we filmed the show, there hadn't been the pop culture explosion yet.
Right.
So I mean, had we had social media when the show was first on, I'm sure all of our lives would have been a lot different than what they are now. But it wasn't until Facebook came along that I even started to get an inclination that Power Rangers continued much further after I left.
Oh yeah.
Because when I was working on the show, I was under the impression that it was going to be like any other Saturday morning cartoon. It would run for a couple of seasons, and then it would be replaced by something else. Much like you were talking about with the advertisements that show up at the end of the summer, it would get replaced at some point. And so I had no idea that it's still been going on. I had no idea that there were different iterations of it and new casts and that sort of thing. I had no idea that my character was still involved with it at all. And it wasn't until Facebook where I had gotten messages from people or strangers asking me if I was the guy that was on Power Rangers, and I said, "Yeah, wow, is that show still going on?" and that's when I started to do a little digging and found out, oh wow, this thing really took off and has this history and all this stuff, and has a big fan base and stuff. And in 2011, I was actually invited to my first convention in Pittsburgh called TechShowCon. And that was the first time that I got to sit in front of an audience and understand the impact that myself and the character and the show had on a lot of people, and started to understand the gravity of all of that. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, so you didn't realize that until really 2011, just 9 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mentioned this a little bit earlier on, and my wife just texted me and let me know that my son does not believe you're Zordon because you have a body. So you can't be the real Zordon. But here we are. I'm 9 years old. We find the Power Rangers. It's world changing for my brother and I. every day, I mean, I don't know if you have children, but they watch the same things over and over and over again. And one of the things that plays in our house nonstop, and it's because it's one of the few things that doesn't drive me crazy, is Power Rangers. Like, I hear your voice literally every single day because my sons, they love it too. And so this thing, it's one of the things we bond over because it's something I loved when I was younger, but it's, 30 years later and they love it as well. So
Right. And that's one of the things that I find most gratifying about being associated with the show is that it has generated so much positivity. It connects people, it joins everybody together. It's a common thread for people. I mean, complete strangers can come together and they find out that they both like Power Rangers, and they're like, the best friends immediately right after that. And so I find that incredibly gratifying that something that we did 27 years ago still has this longevity, still has this this heart to it that people really identify with and enjoy and have an unabashed love for it. I think that's so fantastic. I love it.
So let me ask you this, and I know you said that you were doing the episodes in like five episode blocks, things like that. You just go in for about 30 minutes, bang out the episodes, go back to life, come back, and then be Zordon every once in a while. Have you gone back to like watch at least the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers run?
Oh yeah, I had to. I had to figure out exactly what happened to Zordon because I kept getting asked, how did you feel when Andros shattered the tube? I was
Right.
like, wow, they killed him off. Okay, well, I've got to figure this out. So I had to do research. I had to go back and watch. And um, as a writer, as a storyteller, and someone who has a background in acting and all that kind of thing, you kind of wonder why the choices were made for these episodes that they did, because I'm sure had I stayed out there, I was really talking to Tony about possibly writing for the show. I had a number of ideas that I had pitched him about, well, what about this episode? And I know that they had to tailor the episodes around the Sentai footage that they had. So they had to come up with these different concepts and stuff. So doing the research and watching the episodes and sitting through them and sort of like enjoying the rated G with extra cheese kind of flavor that Power Rangers is, and just enjoying it for what it is. I mean, it's a lot of fun to watch. I mean, as a fan of kaiju and all that stuff, the robots, and I just love the Megazord. I think it's just fantastic, and it's just fun and hilarious to watch, and I just enjoy it. So yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So I mean, you're caught up because fans were asking you like, oh, how did you feel about that? So you didn't even know like, oh yeah, by the way, Andros breaks the tube and then destroys all the evil in the universe and the good guys win.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Okay. So, have you watched any of the newer stuff, or did you kind of end it at the end of Zordon?
Oh yeah. I watched what is it? Oh gosh, I'm gonna get yelled at for this because I can't remember. What was the Mega one with
Super Mega Force?
Super Mega Force. Yes, Mega Force. I'm gonna get so yelled at about that. Mega Force Beef Morphers. I watched episodes of Dino Thunder. I watched episodes of Zeo Turbo. I watched the Turbo movie. So I mean, I've dabbled in each one of the seasons. I meet the cast members at conventions and stuff, and I don't know what it is about the casting process for Power Rangers, but they seem to have this secret formula of picking and choosing people that really are heroic in their hearts to begin with. All of the people that I've met that are a part of the show, they're terrific people. They really enjoy being a Power Ranger. They really enjoy meeting the people that watch the show and talking with them about the show. And they're just wonderful people. And so again, there's this degree of positivity about the show that just keeps rippling outward over and over. And it's just really great to be a part of that.
So since starting the convention, and obviously there's been some losses for the cast and things like that, with like Thoi Trang and things like that. But I mean, have you gone back and like, yeah, I mean, I know obviously you and Austin have done conventions together, but have you, met Jason David Frank and Amy Jo Johnson, David Yost, Walter Jones?
Yeah, I mean, because I was cast and shot the pilot with the original cast, I never got to meet Jason David Frank or Thuy Trang, uh, and was very upset when I learned that Thuy passed away. But I didn't meet Jason for, gosh, 22 years, something like that. We only met like 4 years ago.
That's absolutely.
And we, as you watch the show, we're talking to one another. I'm up there talking to him, he's talking to me. So from an audience standpoint, you go, of course you know each other. I mean, you live down the street from each other, you have lunch every day.
Right.
No, it doesn't work that way. And Jason's a great guy. I mean, we laughed and joked about stuff, and of course I get to hang out with some of the other Rangers on a pretty regular basis, or at least I did, pre-COVID, before everything kind of stopped. Karen Ashley and I, and Catherine Sutherland, Nakia Burris, Johnny Young Bosch, Steve Cardenas, David Yost. I mean, it was just this big family, and we would all go to dinner at one night during convention. It was just a lot of fun.
That is that's a murderer's row of like my childhood heroes you just named. And it's weird. This is a lot less scary than I thought it was going to be. I think I told you that I was terrified I was going to forget all my questions and we wouldn't be able to talk about anything. This is like talking to a nice guy, and then every once in a while, I remember I'm like, no, but that's Zordon. You're talking to Zordon right now. So.
Well, perhaps I should talk like this and frighten you.
See, there it is. I don't remember what I was going to ask you now. So let's talk about that. I mean, you said when you kind of developed the character, there wasn't a lot to it. They kind of gave you the setting like, he's a floating head that is stuck in a time warp. And you pulled from your comic book knowledge and D&D and Greek mythology. How did you like kind of settle on like, this is what Zordon sounds like? Well,
during the audition, when the other gentleman and I were given the sides and were basically, told Zoltar is a 10,000-year-old wizard and he's trapped in a time warp. I never saw the Power Rangers story Bible or whatever information they had put together that would be the guideline for the writers of the episode. So I don't know what kind of information they had come up with or backstory to sort of fill in the blanks for character motivation and that sort of thing. I'm under the impression that they on one hand, they were really sort of making it up as they went along, because there was no real information about Zordon, who he is, why is he in the time warp, why is he trapped there, what is the planet of Eltar, where is it, how is it associated with the Morphin grid, how did Zordon get associated with the Morphin grid, where do the coins come from? None of that information was available when we shot. I think all of that stuff was put together as they were reaching in, as they were writing the episodes. It just all came together. But in the room where we were reading the signs, he was in one corner and I was in another. And I could hear him across the room from me, and he was doing this sort of techno-wizard kind of mad scientist kind of take on the character. And his voice was very crackly and high-pitched, and he'd be like, Power Rangers, come to the command center and do it. And I was like, I'm not really sure if that's the right take that you want to do. But he had a very unique look. He was already bald to begin with. He had a very prominent hawk-like nose, and I think the camera really would have liked him as a character. I just didn't think that he had the right take on what was going on with the character. And when I was reading through it, and I was concentrating on the phrase 10,000-year-old wizard, I was like, wow, that's a long period of time. And because I had a background in reading a lot of fantasy, reading a lot of Greek mythology when I was growing up, I was trying to think of this character who was a mentor. He was a father figure. And the thing that kept going around in my head was like, well, Zeus on Mount Olympus, here's this voice from on high. Here's this this all-powerful character, that's the kind of tone you should do. It should be the sort of like this deep, sonorous tone, and that's what I came up with. And the voice that I used in the audition was the voice that ended up being used in the show.
So, I mean, you define that character. I mean, you're there for like the almost 2 seasons before you leave. And I'll tell
Oh
you,
well, I my final episode voicing the character was episode 31, so I was there for half of season 1, but they continued to use my face throughout the life of the season. So season 1, 2, 3, Turbo Zeo, uh, was it Lost Galaxy and In Space
yep,
or
and it's in space after, yeah, yep.
So my face was there, but Robert Manahan took over as the voice of the character starting with episode 32.
Okay.
So when a lot of people think of Zordon's voice, they're probably thinking of Robert. But Robert was trying to match my tone, my cadence, and I think he did a really good job. So I always have to give props to Robert because, I mean, and again, unfortunately, Robert's no longer with us.
Sure.
And I'm sure it would be great. He and I would, do shows and stuff together, and it would be great to be there with him. But I do think that when a lot of people think about Zordon, they're hearing Robert. So, yeah.
So I can tell you, as a Power Rangers diehard, when the voices switched, as kids are way more observant than I think people give them credit for. It was very jarring. Like, it was like, what's going on here with Zordon? So I think kids know. And then, like, as an adult, like, you go back and you're like, oh, okay, so David left, Robert came in. Okay, yeah. But it was still David's face that we saw, every Saturday morning in the giant tube. Now, I have a question from a fan. I know the answer to this question, but I'm going to let you answer it because it's probably way, way better that way. Did you see that more adult take that they did with James Van Der Beek a few years ago?
Yeah, I did. We were actually in Pensacon when it was released, and I remember sitting in the hotel room and texting Karen Ashley saying, "Have you seen this thing? Have you seen it?" And the teenager in me, when I saw it, was like, "This is really freaking cool." Joseph Kahn and Adi Shankar put together like this little bootleg Power Rangers thing, yep. And it's dark and it's gritty and it's really filmed well. Joseph Kahn knows his way around the camera. He had some really amazing shots, and there was that teenager part of me was like, "This is cool. Look at that. Oh, that's awesome." And then there's the part of me that's attached to the show is like going, and it's just not Power Ranger stuff.
No, absolutely. I agree. Now, I will say, because we are Coliseum of Comics, I have to ask, have you taken a look at the new Boom comic based on you guys?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
There are parts that I think that, so the new volume, the volume I'm referencing is written by Kyle Higgins, and he deals with Lord Draken, and I'm not going to spoil that for anybody that hasn't read it yet, but it really feels like he took some elements from that movie, the gritty reboot, and then also the original series, and put them together, and it kind of works pretty well together. Like, it's somewhere like kind of meets in the middle.
Yeah.
You see that with like the more militant look of the Rangers and things like that, right?
Yeah, I mean, Kyle Higgins, the writer for Shattered Grid and all that stuff, and Ryan Parrott for the new comics that are out now. Those guys have really dialed into the heart of what Power Rangers is about, but they've brought it into 2020 or whatever, 2018, I guess, is when it started or whatever. They really have brought it into the modern age where it's still this sort of cheesy kids who are transforming and all of a sudden are involved in this galactic war that they had no part in to begin with, and really gave it a lot of weight. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. The
show is a lot of fun and it's visually exciting and stuff like that, but it's really light on depth. But the comics really do give everything a lot of weight. And I was very honored to be a part of the Shattered Grid live panel that we did at Power Morphicon in 2018, which I got to do the voice of the character 25 years later, and I was on the same panel with Barbara Goodson, who was the voice of Rita. It was the first time we acted together in 25 years, and it was awesome to be a part of that. And I hope Hasbro is listening and understands that if they did an animated version of the show and brought back the original voices from the characters, that the fans would just go nuts over that stuff.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's a blank check at that point.
yeah, and the artists that work on those comic books are just phenomenal. The way they're so dynamic, the way the characters are moving, the way they're positioned, and they're able to capture moments that go way beyond what the show actually did. And it's just really thrilling to look at those and see that, we planted a seed 27 years ago and it has grown into this giant tree of awesomeness and really, really cool stuff.
Well, listen, you are probably one of my all-time biggest heroes. I get to meet you on Wednesday. That is the craziest thing that I can even. I did not see that coming. I'm gonna let you get back to your evening. Saving
Okay.
the universe from Rita Repulsa, because I'll keep you here all night otherwise.
Okay.
David, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for agreeing to do this, guys. David and Austin St. John, that's Jason, the Red Power Ranger. They have a 7-stop tour here in Florida, beginning with us at Coliseum Comics on Wednesday. They will be at our Millennia store and our Kissimmee store. Yes, I will also be there. Probably not as exciting as Zordon and Jason, but I'll be there as well. Guys, thank you for tuning into this episode of Coliseum Forum, and we will see you tomorrow night at 6 p.m., where I'll be interviewing Austin St. John, also known as Jason, the Red Ranger. David, again, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Great to meet you.